Hey everyone, and welcome back. We love to take a deep dive into stories that you share, and today is no exception.
Always fascinating to see what's resonating with people.
Right. So this one, it's a Reddit post,
Yeah.
and it comes from the Waiting to Wed subreddit.
Okay.
Yeah. And let me tell you, the comments section is a whirlwind.
Oh, I bet. Deadlines in relationships can be a really sensitive topic.
Yeah.
Lots of strong opinions.
Oh yeah, for sure. So basically, this woman, she's been with her boyfriend for 6 years. They're both 32.
Okay.
And she's like, hey, we've been together for a while now, and I'm kind of getting frustrated at no progress towards marriage.
Mm.
They've even been at couples counseling for years.
Interesting. Sometimes couples counseling can almost be a way to kind of put off the inevitable,
Yeah,
especially if one person is more ready for that next step than the other.
exactly. And that seems to be the case here. She finally decides to give him an ultimatum.
Okay.
Engagement by Halloween 2024, or they are done.
Wow.
Halloween comes and goes, no ring. So she asks him to move out.
Wow. That takes a lot of courage
Right?
to set a hard deadline like that and really stick to it,
Yeah,
even when it's tough. That shows real commitment to what she wants.
I know. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Post-breakup, she starts thriving. She takes in a teenager who needed a home, launches her own firm, finally tackles all those house projects that have been piling up.
It's amazing how sometimes removing what feels like dead weight can just open up so many possibilities.
It's like unlocking a whole new level.
Right, like all that time and energy that might have been going into a relationship that wasn't really fulfilling her needs is now freed up.
Oh, totally. And get this.
Okay.
She realizes all those chores that her boyfriend claimed he was doing, they only take her 15 minutes each night.
Oh, wow. Talk about an eye-opener.
I know. The comments section was flooded with people sharing similar stories about seat warmer partners, just content to coast along.
Oh, yeah. I bet that resonates with a lot of people, this idea of someone taking up space in your life, but not really contributing equally.
Right. And it can be so draining.
Totally. It can really make you start to question your own worth if you're constantly putting in more effort than the other person.
Exactly. Some of the comments from people's grandmothers were hilarious, but also kind of on point. One said her grandma used to say, time to shit or get off the pot.
Oh my gosh.
That's great. When talking about these situations.
That's perfect.
Another one said, he's as useful as tits on a bull.
You know, those sayings are funny, but they also point to something deeper, like a shift in what people expect from relationships.
Totally. Less tolerance for settling these days.
Absolutely.
And you can really feel that in the outpouring of support for this woman.
Yeah.
Everyone's praising her strength, calling her an inspiration for taking control.
It's like there's this collective sense of empowerment in recognizing that, hey, you don't have to stay in a situation that isn't working for you anymore.
It's like giving yourself permission to prioritize your own happiness.
Exactly. And that can be really powerful. It reminds me of the importance of self-respect. Recognizing when a relationship has become stagnant, when you're not growing or moving forward together.
Have you ever felt that way in a relationship, like you're stuck in a rut? What are your non-negotiables? I mean, it's such an important question to ask yourself.
It really is. And it's not always easy to answer, honestly, especially when you've invested so much time and emotion.
Yeah.
But ultimately, putting your own well-being first is crucial.
And it's not just about romantic relationships, right? This whole thing about setting deadlines and recognizing when to walk away, it applies to so many areas of life.
Oh, absolutely. Whether it's a job that's draining you, a friendship that's become one-sided, or even just like a living situation that's not working anymore, knowing when to draw a line in the sand is so important.
Okay, but before we dive into applying deadlines to other areas of life, I want to go back to the reactions to this woman's story for a second.
Sure.
It seemed to really strike a chord.
Yeah, it did. I think it speaks to a bigger conversation that's happening right now about women's empowerment, challenging those traditional relationship roles, and really putting personal fulfillment first.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like her story gave people permission to step back and be like, wait a minute, am I settling here?
Totally. I know I've stayed in jobs or friendships longer than I should have, just out of fear of change or feeling obligated.
Yeah.
But this post really got me thinking about the cost of staying stuck. It's not just romantic relationships. It's like recognizing your worth in every area of life.
Such a good point. And it ties into this idea of setting deadlines not just for other people, but for yourself too. Taking control of your life, creating the future you want, instead of just waiting around for things to happen.
It's like setting a deadline is a way of saying to yourself, hey, I'm worth it. I deserve to have my needs met,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. It's about moving from someday to today. And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be these big, huge life goals either. Sometimes it's just about setting smaller deadlines, just to create some momentum and build your confidence.
So how do we actually go about setting those deadlines?
Yeah.
Like there's a difference between having a goal and actually taking action.
Right.
What advice do you have for people who are maybe feeling overwhelmed or not sure where to even start?
That's a great question. I think the first step is to really get clear on what you want. Like, what are your values? What are your non-negotiables? What kind of life are you trying to create for yourself? And once you have a vision, you can break it down into smaller steps.
So instead of I want to start my own business,
Hmm.
it's more like, okay, I'm going to set a deadline for writing a business plan.
Exactly. And be specific with those deadlines. Don't just say, sometime this year.
Yeah.
Pick an actual date. It makes you accountable. It creates a sense of urgency.
Makes sense. Like having a roadmap. But what about when we set deadlines and then we just don't meet them?
Right.
Procrastination and self-sabotage are real.
Oh, totally. We've all been there. But I think it's important to remember that setting deadlines is not about being perfect. It's about growth and progress. And sometimes that means adjusting your deadlines or breaking things down into even smaller steps.
So it's okay to be flexible as long as we're moving forward.
Exactly. And I think it helps to understand the why behind your deadline. What are you trying to achieve? How will it improve your life? When you connect to that purpose, it's much easier to stay motivated, even when things get tough.
I love that. Reminding yourself why you set the deadline in the first place. It's not just about checking something off a list. It's about creating a life that actually feels good, you know?
Exactly. And celebrate those successes along the way. Every step you take, every little win is a victory. It reinforces that positive momentum, reminds you that you're capable of achieving amazing things.
It's like giving yourself permission to acknowledge your own progress, which can be so motivating, especially with those long-term goals. But what about those times when we feel stuck or discouraged? Like, what advice do you have for people who are struggling to stay on track?
Well, first of all, remember that you're not alone. Everyone faces challenges. It's part of the journey. But having a support system can make a world of difference. Friends, family, a therapist, even a coach. Sharing your goals with others, having people to cheer you on can really help you stay motivated.
It's true. I think sometimes we try to do it all on our own, but having that support and accountability can be so powerful.
It's like having your own personal cheerleading squad,
Yeah.
reminding you why you started and encouraging you to keep going.
Yeah, we all need that sometimes.
Yeah.
And you know, it's interesting to think about how this all relates back to that Reddit post. The woman in the story received so much support from that online community, like she tapped into this collective yearning for empowerment.
That's what struck me too. It wasn't just her personal story. It felt like a cultural moment. It opened up this dialogue about setting boundaries, knowing your worth, and having the courage to go after what you want.
It resonated with so many people because on some level, I think we all want
Yeah.
that sense of agency in our lives.
Yeah.
The feeling that we have the power to shape our own futures, whether it's in our relationships, our careers, our personal growth.
And setting deadlines, that's a way to do that. It's a way to take back control and say, I'm not going to wait for things to happen. I'm going to make them happen.
Yeah, and that's a message I think everyone needs to hear. So if you're listening to this and you're feeling inspired, what advice would you give them?
Start small. Don't try to change everything at once. Pick one area where you want to make a change and set a realistic deadline. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about progress. Celebrate your wins, learn from your setbacks, keep moving forward. Such good advice. And it's important to remember that setting deadlines isn't about adding more pressure to your life. It's about creating a framework for growth and being intentional.
Right.
It's about taking ownership of your own happiness and creating a life that feels authentic.
And sometimes that means letting go of things that aren't serving you, even if it's scary at first.
So as we wrap up this part of the deep dive, what's the one key takeaway you want listeners to remember about setting deadlines?
You have the power to create the life you want. Don't be afraid to dream big. Set those goals, take action. The journey might not always be easy, but it's so worth it. That's awesome. And speaking of inspiring journeys, I want to remind our listeners about a fantastic resource. If you're enjoying this deep dive and you want to explore these ideas even further, be sure to check out the Voices of the Soul podcast and the Shauna Pelage YouTube channel. You'll find so much insightful content and practical tips to help you live a more intentional and fulfilling life. And now let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with the final part of our deep dive into the power of setting deadlines. Welcome back, everybody. I am still thinking about those grandmas.
I know, me too. What is it about grandmas?
Right. Like time to shit or get off the pot.
Straight to the point, no time for messing around.
Exactly. It's like they've seen it all and they're not afraid to tell you what's what.
Yeah, and you know what? I think those sayings really capture the heart of this whole conversation. Know your worth, set your boundaries, and don't be afraid to walk away from something that's not serving you.
And it's so powerful to see how that message resonated with everyone in the comments.
Totally. It's like they were all saying, yes, finally someone said it. It's so validating, right? To know you're not the only one who's felt that way. And I think that's what makes this whole story so powerful. It's not just about one woman's experience. It's about a much bigger shift in how we approach relationships and our own happiness.
It's about recognizing that we have a choice. We don't have to settle for less than we deserve. We can create relationships, careers, lives that actually light us up.
And sometimes that means making tough decisions. It might mean walking away from something that's comfortable or familiar, even if it's scary. But as we saw in this story, sometimes letting go is the key to finding something even better.
Sometimes you got to close the door to open a window, you know.
Mm.
And in this case, it sounds like she opened a whole bunch of windows.
She did. And it's just so inspiring to see how it all worked out for her. It's a good reminder that we all have the power to create positive change in our lives. Doesn't always happen overnight, but it's possible.
Absolutely. And you know what? We don't have to wait for anyone to give us permission to do it. We can set those boundaries, chase those dreams, put ourselves first, starting right now. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this conversation about setting deadlines?
You have the power to create the life you want. Don't be afraid to set those deadlines, make bold choices, and go after what you deserve. It might not be easy all the time, but it's so worth it.
I love that. And that's exactly what we try to do here on Voices of the Soul, help you create a life that feels aligned with your truest self. So thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.